Yes, everybody, welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ here to discuss some breaking news, for lack of a better word, that broke on Friday morning, just kind of around 11 a.m., I think, is when things really started blowing up and going out to the public. Couple things we'll hit on real quick. Jay Bateman, defensive coordinator for the Tar Heels, and UNC have parted ways after 3 seasons. And also adding on to that, Jovan Dewitt is out as UNC's special teams and outside linebackers coach. I'm going to read a statement from Carolina in regards to Jay Bateman specifically, and then we'll hit on Jay before we kind of hit on Jovan a little bit later in the podcast. But here's the quote, here's the statement from Carolina. After postseason conversations between Coach Brown and Coach Bateman, the pair mutually decided it was best to part ways. In addition, based on anticipated structural adjustments to the defense, the duties of the outside linebackers coaching positions are expected to change. Therefore, Coach DeWitt will not return to the staff next season. We appreciate everything Coach Bateman, Coach DeWitt, and their families did for the program, and we wish them nothing but success as they transition to their next opportunity. So obviously that statement hitting on Jay Bateman and Jovan Dewitt with the news that broke that they are no longer a part of the UNC football staff. AJ, we've talked about it off camera a little bit. We did a podcast on the defense we just put out on Thursday as well, kind of hitting on some of the stats with the defense specifically. Not a surprise. I mean, I hate to see anybody get fired. I don't care who you are. I don't care what Carolina fan you are, and you're pissed off at how the defense performed. You never wish for anybody to lose their job, and I hope that that's not what Carolina fans were hoping in the slightest. In that, but I know there were Carolina fans that were feeling that way. But you never wish anybody to lose their job in that respect.
That's what fans do.
Yeah, when you look at the stats, though, Carolina's progressively got worse since 2009 on the defensive side of the ball in about every major statistical category. Really bad ending to the NC State game. Really, really bad showing against South Carolina. And from what you reported as well, it seemed like the final straw, THI was told, was the unit's performance in that Duke's Mayo Bowl loss. So no real surprises here, but news officially broken and is official now that Jay Bateman and DeWitt are out. So what are your initial thoughts on Bateman specifically? If you want to hit on DeWitt as well, go ahead.
Well, we've been preparing for this for a while, and we have a standard about 3 sources for something like this. We had a couple pretty good ones, and my phone is blowing up like crazy.
Yeah, I can hear it. My phone over here is vibrating like that.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. So pardon me if I look down 600 times, but I talked to somebody last Friday who had some information, and they know a thing or two about a thing or two. I'll just leave it at that. And I was told that there would be 2, either had already been fired for lack of a better term, or would be, and possibly 3. And right now we'll just leave it at 2. And I was told that Bateman and DeWitt would be the guys. I told you guys New Year's Eve. I told you guys that's what I was hearing. We got to prepare for it. I wrote the Jay Bateman UNC parting ways story on New Year's Eve in a hotel room in Boston. So I had it all ready to go. I ground out those numbers that we ran with the regression piece last Saturday, which clearly illustrates the defense has gotten significantly worse each of the last 3 years. And I've heard some stuff about some differences in philosophy and that kind of thing. I think that's 100%. Basically, the statement by UNC bears that out. What I was told in December, and I put this on the board, and if you're a premium member, you have access to that information because a lot of times we don't put it in the podcast or in free content. But my understanding, talking to multiple sources in December, was that the belief was that the tweaks can be made from within. It's better to have coaches who know the individual players, the personnel, the trajectories of these guys, okay? Mm-hmm. They know where they were when they arrived, where they are now, so you can really have a gauge of whatever their individual process is, right? Instead of going out and finding somebody new to come in who doesn't know anybody from Adam, doesn't really know the process of the last couple of years, and will take a while to adjust, especially with a little bit earlier spring practice schedule than they had last year. So they thought, okay, let's make some tweaks. And there was some convincing that tweaks were all that was needed, and guys get a little bit older. And so let's see that play out in the bowl game. Well, my question to a couple of my sources was, well, what happens if a bad South Carolina offense blows it up? And I was told by one source said, well, they'll have to revisit. Well, they revisited because a bad South Carolina offense, who the game's MVP in the bowl game, was the 9th Gamecock to attempt throwing a pass this season. Yeah, and that had to be, and that was the last straw. That was clear indicator that it wasn't working. I think that there's, and this is not being disrespectful to Jay Bateman in any way, shape, or form, Jacob, but I've talked to a lot of football people who question whether his scheme, what he ran at Army, can be effective at the Power 5 level. Can those athletes run that scheme? Does it make sense to use them that way? And a lot of people question whether or not he was using the full ability of each individual athlete, instead trying to do this collective whole thing that you did at Army, which you have to do maybe at Army because the quality of athlete isn't the same. Out of Carolina, maybe run more base stuff and rely on their individual skills. And the perfect example that was given to me by someone who knows a lot about defense, he said, you've got probable NFL corners out there, Grimes and Duck. So why aren't you in press coverage? Why aren't you using it? Why are you over communicating from the safeties to the corners to the linebackers and having all that mass confusion that we saw in pre-snap? And what you're doing is when a guy is confused and he's a split second late off the snap, he's no longer a great athlete. He's just an average athlete because he's a split second late. And the difference between a great athlete and an average athlete is that split second. Watch how Georgia closes. Watch how Bama closes. That's that split second they always have. And then they have also the advantage of being on point with their schemes defensively. So that was something that people had seen a couple of years ago, but they wanted to give it time. And also they kind of unveiled more in the scheme into this year, and then they started scaling back some. But the mass chaos and pre-snap situations, the appearance of lack of preparedness, and the admittance of lack of preparedness. The Georgia Tech game when Jeremiah Gemmel said, we did not prepare for Jeff Sims. Even though Jeff Sims was one of the 3 Yellow Jackets that went to the ACC kickoff as a face of the program. He was the returning starting quarterback. He had been cleared the week before against Clemson, but did not play. They didn't think it was right to get him into that game. Jeff Collins spoke about him in his press conference the week of the North Carolina game, yet UNC didn't prepare for him. They prepared for Jordan Yates instead. Well, Jeff Sims took over late in the second quarter, and in the second half led Tech to 313 yards. That was the second red flag. The first one actually came a couple of weeks before, with just basically there was some panic going on with the defensive staff about some things that were happening. They saw some red flags that they saw basically. That maybe this defense is not as good as we thought it was, and we're concerned. And I think that we saw over the course of the year that kind of played itself out, and a change was made. And to be perfectly honest with you, a change had to be made. There's no other way around it. I think Mack Brown gave Jay Bateman every opportunity to show that his scheme can work, to show that the communication in the scheme makes a lot of sense. Mack told us repeatedly in the second half of the season that they had scaled things back. Because, we would ask him about defense. He'd say, well, like on Mondays, he said, well, you're going to get Jay later on. You could ask him. So I asked him more specifically as the head coach, blah, 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 what is wrong? And he's basically said, that they have scaled things back. They have simplified. So they were simplifying and things still weren't working. Now, I'm going long-winded here, but let me go to one other point. The defense did show some signs of improvement late. The second half against Pittsburgh, they were very good, and they made some adjustments. The NC State game, they had nothing to do with the block punt, then State scored on its first full drive, I guess, went up 14-0. Until the last minute 57, the defense played well that day. So that was part of the optimism. That was the sales pitch from Bateman saying, look, we're starting to get it. These young guys are starting to pick it up. Miles Murphy's playing a little bit better. Des Evans has made a few plays, et cetera. And then they lost Conley in the Wofford game, and then what happened in the bowl game. So a change had to be made. You go 6-7 with all that talent, and you see a clear regression. So if you want the program to move forward, a change had to be made. So they went ahead and did it.
Yeah, I think when, we did the podcast, like I said, put out on Thursday on the defense, when you really look at those numbers, you can find it on TarHeelIllustrated.com and in our piece that we put out about Jay Bateman and UNC parting ways. You can find it in there, but it, like you said, it had to be made. There was no way that, with how the defense had regressed since Bateman's first year coming in, that something wasn't going to have to be changed. I mean, for me, there was just no other option. There was really no way around it for the Tar Heels to take a quick shift and do something else, because obviously what was trying to be implemented with the changes that were put in this year, with the simplification that Carolina tried to do on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, it worked in spurts, but when you end the last two games of the season like the Tar Heels did on the defensive side of the ball, you have to make a change. And obviously with some other performances that came throughout the year.
One of the things that was told to me, Jacob, by a football guy, and I'm not going to name him, but by a football guy, he said, the last minute 57 at NC State was all scheme.
Yeah.
Like what? Why weren't they in some kind of prevent? Why you don't get beat for a 60-yard touchdown in that situation? You keep the ball in front of you, and that they were not even in the right scheme. And he's surprised that the change wasn't made then. But to Mac's credit, and I think that this is insight into what kind of man Mac is that Mac gave every opportunity to show that it works, and. There was some significant things that needed to be done to that defense. Let's go back to the 90s. Anybody who's old enough remember the Sun Bowl in 1995 when Carolina had a lead and Texas shredded them in the fourth quarter and won the game. And back, I think it was like 35-31 or something, which in 1990s is like a 48-45 game now. Okay. And that defense had a lot of talent, but it had those stretches. So Carl Torbush was the coordinator. Max said, look, we got to make some changes. We got too much talent on the field to not be playing better. And Torbush made the changes. In 96 and 97, two of the best defenses Carolina's had. The 97 defense was the best defense in college football. And they had three guys taking the first 17 picks, I think it was, in the NFL draft. So Mac knows what the hell he's looking at, And when he says you got to make changes, then you make changes or it's not going to work. So they parted ways. They'll find a new coordinator. We're not going to hit too much on that right now. Also, the Jovan Dewitt element as well. I think that was bound to happen. Well, I was told two people for sure, and I was told those two names. And part of that is Dewitt is connected to the outside linebacker spot. And I think that's one of the core issues with the scheme was 260-pound hybrid linebackers trying to cover slot receivers.
Yeah,
I've been told by a couple of football people that never made any sense at this level. But DeWitt's also the special teams coach, and the special teams in two games, each of the last two seasons, blocked punts were why they lost games. They lost in Tallahassee because of two blocked punts that just blew that game up, and the blocked punt against NC State blew that game up. They made no game-changing plays on special teams. And it was more of a negative than a positive, so they had to make a change there as well.
Yeah. No, so basically, in terms of what you've been hearing and what's kind of been circling around over the last few weeks, no real surprises that Bateman and DeWitt are the two guys that have parted ways with Carolina.
Yeah, no. I think that they were 1A and 1B. And when you change coordinator, you're inevitably going to get more changes in that group. I'm not going to go over names of guys who else might go, but I think a couple will stay for sure because I think they're more entrenched as a part of the program, and Mac will have a say over that as well. But I'm going to tell people what I've been saying in private to people, or when I get lots of DMs or people have found my email address and Facebook. I got a lot of friend requests lately, and they send me DMs on Facebook. Don't fully judge the defensive line, the corners, et cetera, based on what you saw on the field, because a lot of that was the product of the scheme. Yeah. I've had a couple of football people tell me this, and I've been around the sport long enough to know that I see it as well. What's wrong with Tony Grimes? He didn't play that well this year. Tony Grimes was a product of the scheme, the cascading communication. You have about 14 in the modern day football with no huddle offenses. You have about 14 seconds from when the whistle blows in a play to be fully prepared for the next one. So you have all those lines of communication taking place in 14 seconds. And you got this big field, and you got lots of people in the stands. 2 years ago in 2020, there's nobody in the stadium. So the communication was never really an issue because the guys could hear each other. And it wasn't as burdensome to try to actually, hey, did he say this or say that? Or is that guy going there? I'm kind of confused right now. And when you're confused, you're slow. So guys like Grimes, guys like Duck, guys like McMichael, the issues that they had, I think, was more product of the scheme and a product of the communication problems in pre-snap along with the scheme. Defensive line, some of that as well. So I'm not going to go into what else could happen with that group, but new coordinators usually want a couple of their own guys. So
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. But this was bound to happen. I was not convinced before the bowl game that there would be a move made anywhere because of what I'd been told but from multiple sources. But the bowl game was sort of a referendum, if you will. Okay, we made the tweaks, and it wasn't like, Oklahoma was running up that yardage. It was South Carolina. It was a horrible offense
too. Yeah.
With a ton of opt-outs and a wide receiver playing quarterback, someone that the program recruited who was a 4-star quarterback in high school, a guy that they should have known about. If you have all those issues at quarterback and one guy transfers and one guy's injured and you're down to one dude, you scour the roster. You got a lot of people over there. You scour the roster and you find someone who else. What might they do? You follow the way that South Carolina is being covered, and reporters were only allowed in for certain parts of practices, and you could tell that something was being cooked up, and the Bateman and his staff missed on that. So this is not a surprise. It was the right move. I'm not a big fan of championing assistant coaches being fired ahead of time, because we never know what the head coach is telling them to do. Some head coaches get involved more than others. And sometimes a head coach may say, we're doing this, and this week, and it doesn't work, and everyone screams at the coordinator. And he's just doing what the head coach told him to do because that's his boss. We never really know. Head coaches, I'm totally fine with calling for their termination because everything falls under them. We don't always know that about coordinators. But as this has played out, and I've learned a lot more about the discussions that were involved, this makes sense. And I think Mac gave Jay every opportunity to show that it can work. And kudos to Mac, by the way, for being proactive and progressive and trying this defense, because no one had yet tried this kind of defense exactly at the Power 5 level. I think the thinking was, man, look at what Bateman's doing at Army with Army guys, West Point guys. Imagine what he could do with ACC guys. Well, it didn't work like it did at Army for whatever reasons people want to say. But I think with Mac being out of the game, he came in and ran a different offensive scheme and a different defensive scheme than he had previously. So I think I applaud him for doing that. I think it was the right thing to do. Everybody that's a Carolina fan watching this video or listening to us right now, they were all very excited. They were more excited about Bateman when he was hired than they were long ago.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
And it just didn't work out, and there's no shame in that. And Jay will land on his feet. He'll find work. He's a respected mind. He's a very innovative mind. There's a place for that in college football, and I'm sure that he'll learn from it because he's a really smart guy. And hopefully he has success wherever his next stop or stops are. But it was time for a change at North Carolina.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll add this too about Jay. I've had nothing but, for me personally, positive interactions with him. I remember I would sit outside last year in particular, would sit outside on the concourse after the game because I wasn't allowed up in the press box because I was shooting photo and video for us during COVID year. And, Jay would come walking out of the locker room after every game and would always say something to me, as he was walking by. If he saw me on the field before the game, would always come up to me and talk to me. So nothing but positive interactions. Really I like Jay as a person and really nice guy to be around and talk to. So hate to see him go. Hate to see anybody go. I mean, I don't care what profession you're in. I don't like to see people get fired from their jobs. But in this situation, I think it had to happen. AJ, last thing I want to ask you before we wrap this one up. Any idea on maybe what the timeline is in terms? Do you think we'll see another D coordinator hired sooner rather than later? Or do you think this is something that's going to take some time to happen? Do you have any idea what that timeline might look like?
If Mac is anything, he's diligent.
Yes, that's for sure.
And given the timeline from when I first heard about this, I don't think that Mac has been watching Netflix the last week.
Probably not.
In Boonville, he's been doing what he needs to do. So I'll kind of leave it there. I don't think we're going to be sitting here trying to handle a defensive coordinator search for a couple of weeks. I don't think it's going to take that long. I will say this. A lot of people have been asking me about Will Muschamp all week. And just to clarify, he was with Mac at Texas. He was actually named the head coach in waiting at one point, ended up going to Florida. He was head coach of Florida for a few years at South Carolina. I think that if they were to go in that direction, that would certainly be a guy who's proven he knows what the heck he's doing at the Power 5 level as a defensive coordinator. He is currently has been an advisor over at Georgia. He was just named co-defensive coordinator for next season because their defensive coordinator at Georgia took the head coaching job at Oregon. He'll leave after the national championship game. But that doesn't. Glenn Schumann, I think, is the other one at Georgia who's a co-defensive coordinator. I think Kirby Smart will figure that out. But who knows? Maybe Will Muschamp and Mac Brown reunite. But we don't want to get into a bunch of candidates right now. But everyone's going to ask about Muschamp. That's the reason why I'm okay throwing his name out there right now, just kind of giving a little bit. I don't know right now who the next defensive coordinator is going to be. I'd say that honestly. I'm not, holding something back. I just think that if it were a guy like Muschamp, I think North Carolina fans would be pretty happy with that. Yeah, there's a prior working relationship. There won't be that many surprises involved. And I think Muschamp would be a very good hire, but we'll have to wait and see. He could be the next defensive coordinator at Georgia. And would you rather be the defensive coordinator at Georgia or North Carolina if you had the option?
Yeah, probably answer that question.
He probably wants to be a head coach again because he's not very old. And also taking over Georgia's defense, as good as it's been this year, how much better can it get? Maybe go to North Carolina and elevate a defense that's been a dumpster fire for all intents and purposes. Elevate that. Maybe that gets you a head coaching job. Who knows? We'll wait and see. We'll approach that more. I'm going to do what I do, try to figure out, get some names, and we'll throw a responsible list of potential candidates out there as soon as we feel comfortable with any names. And we're going to wait until we get a few, if there are a few names. There might already be something in the works.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But make sure you guys keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com for all your coverage of the coaching candidate hires and how that kind of plays out. We'll obviously stay involved on the message boards as well. I'm sure AJ and everybody else will be, putting some stuff up in there as they kind of go along and hear some things. So, yeah, Jay Bateman, Jovan Dewitt out at Carolina. Jay Bateman after 3 years, and DeWitt was his first year, I believe. I'm not making that up, right?
Second year.
Excuse me. I don't know why. Some reason
we got him. He was hired, and we got him in a press conference with John Lilly late February 2020, and it was 2 weeks later when everything shut down. So
you're right, absolutely right on that. I remember I was actually there for that one. I don't know why I was thinking he's just been here for a year. So 2 years for DeWitt, 3 years for Bateman. Also to add on Bateman, he did sign a 3-year contract extension last February, and his buyout was currently sitting at $1.95 million. So
yeah, he's going to be fine. Right. He's not going to have to worry about paying his bills. But I don't like when people say, he's making a lot of money, he's fine. He's a competitor, and you don't. He's in this for something a lot more than that. So tough time for him, but he'll land on his feet. He'll bounce back just fine. So I'm not too worried about Jay. And I think this was the right move for Mac and for North Carolina.
Definitely. And wish Jay Bateman and Jovan Dewitt nothing but the best in whatever the future holds for them. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Appreciate you guys stopping by and listening to this podcast. Like I said, head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. You can sign up for a premium membership for just $8.33 a month for all your coverage of everything kind of going on right now within the UNC football program. And as soon as somebody is hired and things become official, we'll have it posted on TarHeelIllustrated.com. You can find a link to our website in the description below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you know every single time we upload. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.